Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the comic book storyline, Batman: A Death in the Family. Published across 4 issues of Batman in late 1988, A Death in the Family is a classic arc written by Jim Starlin and penciled by Jim Aparo. Considering its fame and popularity, there's plenty of other videos about the story on YouTube, but I figured I'd put in my 2 cents as well. Plus, some of you have requested I do it. A plot synopsis seems pretty redundant. I mean, who doesn't know what this comic is about? But it's the way I do things. A Death in the Family follows Jason Todd, the second Robin, on a quest to find his true biological mother. Todd was orphaned at a young age when his stepmother died, whom he believed to be his real mother, and his father, a 2-bit hoodlum, was murdered by his employer, Two-Face. We all know the rest. Todd took to the streets on his own and survived by stealing, which eventually led to him crossing paths with the Dark Knight. Batman took him in and trained the young boy to become the second Robin, replacing Dick Grayson, who had moved on and changed his moniker to Nightwing. Of course, in this story, Jason discovers that his mother wasn't his actual mother, and that his real mother is still alive somewhere. He doesn't know who she is, however, but learns of 3 suspects from his father's old address book. One is Charmin Rosen, a Mossad agent stationed in Lebanon. Another is Lady Shiva, the infamous mercenary, who also just happens to be in Lebanon. And finally we have Sheila Haywood, a relief worker in Ethiopia. When Jason is in Lebanon, he bumps into Bruce, who's there looking for the Joker. Really small world, ain't it? Joker, who's in great need of cash to continue funding his hedonistic lifestyle, has come to the Middle East in order to sell a stolen warhead to terrorists. Of course, this is the very same case that Charmin Rosen, Jason's potential mother, is working on, so Bruce and Todd join forces and combine their quests. Together, the heroes bust Joker's plan, forcing him to find another source of income. Naturally, he chooses to steal medical supplies from Sheila Haywood in Ethiopia and sell them on the black market. Obviously, neither Charmin Rosen nor Lady Shiva turns out to be Todd's mother. No, it's of course Sheila, and the entire gang collide again in Ethiopia. This is where Jason gets in way over his head, taking on the Joker himself while Batman was busy, leading to the Boy Wonder's very brutal death. So A Death in the Family is a legendary classic and a seminal piece of work in Batman's history. I'd say it's the most important Batman story from the last 30 years. It left a massive legacy that shaped the world of the Dark Knight more than any other comic. Mourning the loss of his trusty sidekick, the character of Batman was forever changed. Yeah, he lost his parents, but Bruce had never before experienced a casualty in his war on crime. No other story is more called back to than this one. We constantly see it in the comics, animation, video games, and now even the live-action movie franchise. But looking past this very impressive and extremely important legacy, is the actual story itself any good? I'm gonna say both yes and no. Mostly yes. I do really love this comic, but there are some flaws that are just impossible to ignore. We'll get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about Jason Todd. The reason DC decided to kill him off in the first place is supposedly because the fans generally didn't like him. There was even a phone number you could call and cast your vote whether Jason would live or not. Since we now know which side won, it does seem pretty apparent that yes, most fans didn't like Todd very much. I'll never understand that. The Jason Todd years is one of my favorite eras in Batman comics. Not necessarily because of Jason, but he certainly didn't bring the stories down by any means. I can't see why DC needed to kill him, however, or at least do something drastic with the character. He was a very grim and brooding guy, full of anger and angst. He was basically a little Batman. So you had Batman and Batman the Boy Wonder. The point of Robin, both the original Dick Grayson version and the later third Robin, Tim Drake, was to give the Dark Knight some levity, a bit of light and fun, that kept Batman from completely disappearing into the darkness. Sure, this concept wasn't fully hammered down and spelled out until the A Lonely Place of Dying arc, released a few months after A Death in the Family, but the idea had kinda been there ever since Robin was introduced in 1940. Anyway, considering Jason's personality had developed the way it had, what else could DC have done? I suppose they could have turned him into a villain, which they of course did many years later when resurrecting him as the Red Hood. I've never really liked that, and I feel that Jason should have stayed dead. I kind of see A Death in the Family as an homage, or modernized take, or whatever you wanna call it, to all those Silver and Bronze Age stories where Robin supposedly dies. There's so many of them, and on all of them you've got Robin's dead body on the cover, being carried by Batman or lying in the streets. Of course, in those stories Robin never actually died. It was just a ploy to attract readers. But in this story Robin does die for real. Like they were saying, this is how that type of story is really done, and at the same time pay their respects to those old nostalgic classics. So what are these flaws I was talking about? It's very simple really, and if you read the story I think you know. Ludicrous coincidences. The entire plot is made up of ludicrous coincidences. Two of Jason's suspects just happens to be in Lebanon, even though neither of them are even Lebanese. The Joker just happens to go to Lebanon to sell his warhead at the exact same time as Robin is there. Then the Joker just happens to have business with Jason's third suspect in Ethiopia at the exact same time as Robin and Batman are going there. Okay, with the Lebanon thing, I can accept it. It's a real stretch, but if I have to, I guess I can force myself to buy it. But the Joker just happens to seek out the one person in the entire world out of 6 billion people that Jason and Bruce are also looking for at the very same time. What the holy fuck? That is absolutely ridiculous. That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a story that is otherwise good. It is beyond absurd. What the hell was Jim Starlin thinking? Of course there must have been a better way to bring these characters together. Besides this, I don't have any issues with the comic, except for a few nitpicks. Like, why would Jason's father, a small-time Gotham City hood, have connections with a Mossad agent and Lady Shiva? Makes no sense. And how could Jason possibly believe that Shiva, an Asian woman, is his mother? I mean, he's not half Asian. These aren't problems that disturb my enjoyment of the story though, but the coincidences kinda do, at least in the first act. It does take you out of the story a bit. But once Bruce and Jason gets to Ethiopia, things get so intense you don't really care anymore. From there and onwards, the story is just absolutely relentless and never really lets up. Even though I've read it many times before, while rereading it for the sake of this video, I was sitting completely on edge from the moment the Joker captures Robin till the very ending. All that stuff in the finale at the UN embassy, where a vengeful Bruce has finally tracked the Joker down, was incredibly exciting and nerve-wracking. Joker has become the ambassador of Iran and is sent to the embassy to kill off everyone in the assembly hall. Batman knows this, and he wants to kick some serious ass to avenge Jason. He's even thinking of killing Joker once and for all. But of course, as an ambassador, Joker has diplomatic immunity, and touching him could lead to war with Iran. Superman of all people informs Bruce of this, and forbids him from taking action for the sake of the greater good. You don't really know what Bruce is going to do, or what Superman is going to do, or even what Joker is going to do. It's one of the greatest moments in DC Comics history. So let's talk about the Joker. That's what this channel is all about after all, the rogues. In this story, the Joker is a completely despicable, horrifying, mass-murdering, psychotic, pure evil bastard. And I absolutely love it. He's a guy who really fits being portrayed this way. I mean, sure, a sympathetic Joker can work too, like in the Going Sane story arc, which happens to be my favorite Joker story. But this is the way I generally want to see the character depicted. He really is a very frightening and chilling villain. I don't know if we've ever seen him more ruthless and bloodthirsty, but then the story also manages to keep his hilarious sense of humor intact, which I think is very important. In this story particularly, his jokes and goofy personality just makes him seem all the more sinister. I mean, how can he stay so cheerful while committing all these heinous acts? Joker truly is a monster here, and that's obviously what Starlin was going for, considering what he had in store for Robin. He doesn't want you to sympathize with Joker whatsoever. Starlin made the character an evil, terrifying boogeyman for this purpose, but at the same time it's kinda hard to truly hate Joker, because he's so eccentric and entertaining. My favorite bit is definitely the finale at the UN embassy, where Joker represents Iran, wearing that ridiculous getup. It's kind of insane, the Joker becoming an ambassador for Iran. But this is a comic book world, and it feels like something he'd totally do. It's all just a joke to him, and he's obviously enjoying himself putting on a show. That's how the character's always been, a theatrical diva. He even says it himself in this comic, that he prefers a big audience when committing mass murder. His goal in the story is simply to make money, but I think that's not really an excuse. I think what he's really after is to just do all this crazy stuff, like selling warheads to Islamic terrorists. That's the Joker's twisted idea of a fun vacation, and then stealing medical supplies in Ethiopia and filling the empty crates with laughing gas instead. That's a pretty fun gag, right? Well, he certainly thinks so. When it comes to pure evil Joker portrayals, which there are plenty of, this is one of the best in my opinion. As for the artwork, it's classic Jim Aparo. He may not be my #1 favorite Batman artist, but he might very well be who I consider to be the definitive Bat artist. His Batman, Robin, and Joker are just so iconic and kind of what I picture when I imagine the characters. Aparo also drew Batman comics for such a long period of time, starting in the early 70s and still being at it in the early 2000s. It's kind of hard not to think of his Bat imagery as definitive. I would say though that he was probably at his best during the Bronze Age, although in this story he shines more than he usually did at the time. It's probably Aparo's finest work in the post-crisis era. So there you have it. That's Batman: A Death in the Family, a legendary classic and also a pretty great story, despite some of its flaws. Not sure if I'd put it in my top 10 Batman stories, but probably in my top 20 at least. Remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.